More than 1,800 people drowned in their beds. The water rose faster than a person could wake and stand. No sirens sounded. No one knocked on doors. Most victims were asleep when the sea reached their mattresses. January 31, 1953. Evening along the Dutch and English coasts. People went to bed under normal circumstances. No evacuation orders existed. No warning systems operated after dark. Weather forecasts had mentioned storms, but coastal residents had seen storms before. The tide was expected to be high, but not unprecedented. Coastal authorities closed their offices at the end of the working day. The sea defenses were the same height they had been for decades. By midnight, most of the population in vulnerable areas was asleep. There was no infrastructure designed to wake them. In the Netherlands, the provinces of Zeeland and South Holland contained hundreds of small villages built directly behind dikes. In England, communities along the coasts of Lincolnshire, Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, and Kent sat barely above sea level. These were working populations. Fishermen, farmers, dock laborers. They lived in single-story cottages and small brick houses. Their children slept in ground-floor bedrooms. Their elderly stayed in homes built generations earlier, before anyone measured storm surge heights or calculated flood probabilities. No one was watching the sea at 2 in the morning. The storm surge arrived during the night's high tide. Wind from the north pushed water into the narrowing funnel of the North Sea. The surge added nearly 3 meters to the normal tidal height. Dikes that had held for generations were overtopped in darkness. In the Netherlands, sea walls failed along hundreds of kilometers. The water did not crash dramatically. It rose steadily and poured over barriers designed for lower maximums. In England, East Coast defenses were breached at multiple points simultaneously. The sea entered low-lying land as a spreading sheet, not a wave. Gravity and volume did the work. No one witnessed the exact moment of overflow. It happened in total darkness across a broad front. The Dutch dikes were earth structures reinforced with clay and grass. They had been built incrementally over centuries, raised slightly after each major flood, but never engineered for an event beyond historical experience. The 1953 surge exceeded all recorded measurements. Once water flowed over the top, it eroded the inland side of the dikes. Sections collapsed. Gaps widened. The sea moved through these breaches at the speed of a river in flood. On the English side, concrete sea walls cracked under hydraulic pressure. Older sections built from stone and timber simply came apart. The water moved inland across flat agricultural land with nothing to slow it. There were no hills, no elevated ground, just fields and villages in a landscape sculpted by centuries of drainage and reclamation. Most buildings in the flooded zones were single-story. Residents slept at ground level or in beds only slightly elevated. Water entered through doors, window frames, and floorboards. It rose inside closed rooms. People woke to cold water already at mattress height. In darkness, disoriented, many could not locate exits before the water reached their faces. Children drowned in their beds. The elderly could not move quickly enough. Even young adults had seconds to react. Stairs to upper floors did not exist in most homes. There was nowhere to go vertically. Outside, the water was already chest-deep and moving. Survivors described waking to the sensation of drowning, not to the sound of water arriving. Some managed to break through ceilings into attic spaces. Others climbed onto furniture as it began to float. Those who made it outside found themselves in moving water in complete darkness. Street lights were gone. House lights were gone. The cold was immediate. Water temperature was near freezing. Hypothermia began within minutes. People clung to trees, fences, anything fixed. Some were swept away as structures collapsed. Families were separated in the darkness. Parents lost hold of children. The water did not recede. It stayed and kept rising through the early morning hours. By dawn, thousands were already dead. Most had drowned within the first 2 hours, inside their own homes, in rooms they had lived in their entire lives. Electrical substations flooded within the first hour. Streetlights went dark across entire regions. Phone lines, where they existed, were severed as poles toppled into moving water. No one could call for help. No one could be called. Emergency services had no way to know the scope of what was happening. Roads were submerged. Vehicles could not move. Rescue infrastructure did not exist for an event of this scale occurring at night. In the darkness, survivors on rooftops or upper floors could not see other survivors. They could not see the water level. They could not see if help was coming. Some shouted into the blackness. Most waited in silence. The water was cold enough to kill through exposure within hours. Fire stations flooded. Police stations flooded. The local administrators who might coordinate a response were themselves trapped or dead. In the Netherlands, entire islands were cut off. The few roads that connected them were underwater. In England, coastal towns lost all connection to inland areas. The telegraph system, older and more robust than phones, also failed as water reached relay stations. Radio communications were limited to a few emergency frequencies, but most local authorities had no radio equipment. The military was not mobilized until daylight. Hospitals in vulnerable areas flooded. Patients drowned in ground floor wards. In some locations, medical staff tried to move the immobile to upper floors but ran out of time. The infrastructure had been designed for storms, not for the sea entering the land. No emergency plan existed for this scenario because this scenario had been considered impossible. Daylight revealed bodies floating in streets. Survivors stood on rooftops surrounded by water extending to the horizon. Entire villages were submerged except for roof peaks. Rescue boats began moving at first light, but the distances were vast and the boats were few. Bodies were found in beds, in attics where people had tried to climb, and in open water where they had been swept from buildings. The count continued for days. In the Netherlands alone, more than 1,800 dead. In England, over 300. Hundreds of thousands of livestock drowned. The infrastructure to count the dead had to be built while the water was still present. Survivors were pulled from rooftops 12, 18, 24 hours after the water arrived. Some were unconscious from hypothermia. Some had watched family members die during the night. The elderly were disproportionately among the dead, along with the very young. The water remained for days in the lowest areas. Pumping stations had been destroyed. The polders, land reclaimed from the sea over centuries, had returned to the sea. Coffins floated out of cemeteries. Buildings that remained standing were structurally compromised. The military established temporary morgues in schools and churches on higher ground. Identification took weeks. Many bodies were too damaged. Some were never found. The disaster's full scale was not understood for nearly a week because communications remained severed and access remained limited. The initial reports spoke of dozens dead, then hundreds. The final count exceeded 2,000 across both countries. Coastal warning systems were installed across Northwest Europe within 2 years. Sirens were positioned to wake populations at night. Storm surge forecasting became a continuous operation, not limited to business hours. The Dutch Delta Works project was initiated, a decades-long reconstruction of sea defenses designed for water levels witnessed in 1953, plus a margin. In England, the Thames Barrier was eventually built. Building codes in coastal zones were changed to require upper floors. The event established that coastal flooding could kill thousands in a single night. After 1953, the North Sea coast was defended against the night itself. The Netherlands spent the next 50 years building storm surge barriers, reinforced dikes, and sea gates that could be closed when water levels rose. The Delta Works became one of the largest engineering projects in human history. The structures were designed to withstand a flood that would statistically occur once every 10,000 years. The cost was immense. The alternative was understood to be the loss of entire provinces. In Britain, the Thames Barrier was constructed downstream of London after the 1953 flood demonstrated that the capital itself was vulnerable. The barrier took 8 years to build and was completed in 1982. Coastal warning systems were integrated into national civil defense networks. Meteorological agencies were given authority to issue evacuation orders directly, bypassing local government. The protocol was simple. If a surge was forecast during hours of darkness, Sirens would sound in every coastal zone at risk. The population would be woken. They would move inland or to higher floors. The 1953 flood was not caused by a failure to predict the storm. The meteorology had been adequate. The failure was in the assumption that people would be awake, that warnings could be communicated, and that there would be time to respond. The night was reclassified as a structural vulnerability. After 1953, no coastal population in Northern Europe would sleep through a surge again.